Welcome to the Knaves Guild once again. I'm Nick. Looking forward to doing some more world building. Sorry, getting some feedback. Just give me 1 second here. Aha, found the culprit. All right. So today we're going to be moving back onto the globe for now. We'll be continuing that southern hemisphere coastline. And then we'll do some more podcasts, a couple more chapters of Lives of Gethra. And following that, we'll see if we have anyone who would like to join up and be a character. I've added a little message on the bottom of my screen where it'll let you guys know. You can join, just chip in. And I've also updated my about panels, so there's a link to that wiki that we were working on yesterday. I really want that to be easily accessible to you guys. We'll probably get some chat commands and stuff going eventually, but for now you can easily just click it right down there in the about. All right. So let's get going on the globe here. Here we are. So yesterday we had kind of filled in a bunch of the southern coastline, the continent south of the known world of Gethra. And we learned a little bit yesterday in Erlen's chapters about some of the inhabitants of this land and their religion, the path. So we'll continue today working on this coastline. It's going to get a little bit more rugged as we move into the kind of glacier zone of the southern pole. All right. Yeah, we actually had some interaction yesterday when a player got involved playing the role of one of the kings. So we're looking forward to seeing where that goes next. And yeah, if you guys are interested, just say hi, ask how it works. We can always switch over to that if anyone wants to get involved right away. I'll probably work on the globe for a while, and then we'll work on we'll do some of the podcast, and then after that we can get going back on the wiki, continue fleshing out all the world building details so that you guys can check it out, follow it along, or use it for your own world, game settings and your own storytelling if you'd like. Should try to find some royalty-free music, make this part a little bit more chill as we kind of hang out and just work on the globe for a while. One of the viewers yesterday was asking about how this all worked and what kind of availability they would need if they wanted to interact and to take on the role of one of the characters. So I've kind of made sure that that's in my frequently asked questions. If you go to my about section here on Twitch, you can check that out or just feel free to ask me directly. We're going to make sure that people have every opportunity to get back into the same role if they want. But there's also no, like, if you can't make it for a session, it's no problem either. Or if you just decide to move on, we'll just move on as well. So no worries either way. The idea just is to bring in other personalities, other contributions and ideas, and make the world of Gethra a collaborative project from the groundwork up. Kind of want to look a little closer at that. That's some reference material for the Arctic continents. So we'll pull up Google Earth here as well. Just how rugged does that coast get? Can we also add in some? Hmm. No, well, anyway, we'll keep working on this here. Such an interesting part of the world, and yet the resolution is not optimal. I guess not a lot of people are spending all their time looking at it like I am here. All right, it looks like it isn't quite as rough, but there is, and there's larger disjointedness. So we'll kind of keep that in mind as we move forward here. Actually, I should also check with my reference of the glacier activities and tectonic activities. So it looks like, whereabouts are we now? It's really hard to tell on the sphere. I think we're all the way in here. So it looks like there is some zones coming up that are yeah, so this area isn't quite tectonically active, but there'd be some more mountains once we get over underneath of this sea here, or sorry, this island here, this continent, small continent. It's a little bit too close there. Okay. Oh, good question on how long the session will be. I'll probably go until for another hour and change today. It won't all be working on the globe, but I'm going to move on to doing some of the podcasts. We'll be reading a couple more of the chapters today from Lives of Gethra, the website. And then later this evening, I'll probably be back on for more interactive content or working on the wiki if no one's available or interested. I know a lot of bigger streamers are online for 6 hours, 8 hours, and stuff like that. I'm slowly working my way up to it, but it's hard on my voice, having not done anything like this before. So I also am continuing to upload all of this content on YouTube as well. So I know the videos will be available here on Twitch for a while, but they don't stay forever. But over on YouTube, anyone you can catch up on past streams or just look for specific segments. I have everything divided up into playlists and lots of different lots of different ways to access the content. So. And I did get the podcast sorted out now, so it is available on a number of podcasting platforms, Spotify, iHeartRadio. I think it's going to be on Amazon. Lots of different options there for people who just want to read or listen to these stories. If you can't find the podcast on a platform you're listening on, you can always just let me know. I can look into getting it available there too. Slowly making our way around this very large continent under the world. So I think we're moving now into an area that has both tectonic activity and is affected by the perpetual glaciers of this of this climate. So if we look on Google Earth, we can compare that to areas where there's mountains, like over here. So there'd be some tectonic activity around here. So of course, it's hard to tell here. You get a lot of icebergs and stuff like that, but you do have actual, elevation and rocky terrain there. So you're gonna end up with a more jagged coastline. Of course, the people who live in Gethra probably don't have that great of an idea of where the coastline lies versus where the land lies. It wasn't until much more recently in history that we were able to actually look at, parts of the world that were covered in ice and determine where the land actually was, because the ice is, fully covering everything around that area. So. I'll get the closer we get to the pole, the more distorted this will become in 2 dimensions. So if we look over here and zoom in on what we've just been doing, it gets all stretched out like that. So that's something I'll have to kind of find the middle ground for when I'm working on this in Photoshop. When we do kind of a final version of this map, we'll have to kind of draw things somewhat distorted so that if we want to, see what it looks like in a 3-dimensional globe or sphere, we can see that. And that's why often on 2-dimensional maps you have, like if I pull up well, Google Earth won't have that. So if you look at this map of the world, for example, the coastline of Antarctica looks huge and it's very, very long, and yet it is not a larger continent. If we look in Google Earth, it's not a larger continent than any of the others. But it's just because in order to view something that exists in 3 dimensions in 2, you have to distort it somewhat. So that's why you end up with things like that happening. Oops, we want to keep Google Earth over here. Watch, once we move this over to Photoshop, we'll find that there's some spot in the coastline where I just left a big hole because I forgot to fill it in. That's doesn't work so well when we're that close. On this map of the whole globe, I don't know. It's hard to say because it's been a long time since I worked on it a lot. I haven't really talked about it too much on the stream, but I took quite a long break from the world of Gethra, and during that time I didn't work on the globe that often. I did work on a different map of the globe, which I haven't really shown on the stream here, but I can show that as well. And I decided I wasn't very happy with it once we got it into 3 dimensions. So let me just pull that up for you guys. So I did work on this for many, many hours, and it's quite detailed, as you can see with, we have like rivers everywhere. And quite a bit of work went into this level of detail. But some of the land masses like this are, they look a little blocky in 2D, and once I put it into 3D, it just became this stretching like point of land. It was a little silly and didn't really look like anything that we see on Earth. So I realized that I couldn't work entirely in 2 dimensions to design a realistic globe. And so I kind of went back to the drawing board. I did a lot of research because a lot of people who work on big maps like these, they just are constantly going back and forth between working in 2 dimensions and then projecting it onto a sphere, and that it's just a lot of trial and error, which I just didn't have the patience for. I thought there's got to be a better way, so I did figure out eventually how to make this program Blender work. Blender's a free 3D editor that anyone can use. So if anyone wants to attempt making their own globe and follow my lead. I did talk a little bit more about the process in my earlier globe videos, um, and you can see kind of the process of how I go about that, and then that will allow us to get shapes that work better here. But this iteration of the globe I've worked on for, I'm not sure. Well, I've done like maybe an hour and a half or so on stream, and we've finished all of this coastline up to here, and we've finished all of this coastline along the north of this coast. So what did I do before that? I finished this part below and this continent. So I would say probably no more than 10 hours have gone into making everything that I've done so far on this sphere. But it will be substantially more once we get around to working in Photoshop. I'll have to redraw a lot of this coastline in Photoshop, but it'll be a lot faster because I'll have that guideline. I think the reason that not a lot of people have tried making a globe this way is because it's a little counterintuitive for most from the digital art side of things. Essentially, what I'm doing here is working with white and black, and I'm painting both onto this sphere as like texture. So when rather than erasing, I'm actually just drawing with white over top of the other lines. So it's almost as rudimentary as working, well, or it's probably more rudimentary than even working with Paint, Microsoft Paint, which is not a very common artist's tool, and so it's a little bit difficult that way. But it saves a lot of time rather than doing that repetitive, globe projection, trial and error to draw every line, you know. Um, So I think it's better in the long run. Let me look back at my guide here. So it looks like this continues quite a ways past the isle. Oops, let me close out that map too. Oh, I see. It's more just this island, and then we leave the tectonic area, and it's smoother coast slightly until we get most of the way towards towards this branch of land, and we go around this big kind of inland sea. Be somewhat like the Mediterranean, perhaps. I was actually just saying to my wife last night that the the process of working on the globe feels like it's sped up a lot, because for quite a while I wasn't working on it, or I would work on it for just a little bit at a time, and now all of a sudden we finished a continent and we're halfway down the next. So it's kind of exciting to see it move along. Although I'm sure will be more exciting for most people in the audience here to see it, when we're working on colors and naming places and locations and coming up with who lives where on this world. It's hard to get a good level of detail here for some of the little islands and stuff. If you look on Google Earth and you zoom in on any of those areas, you've got thousands and thousands of little tiny islands and waterways. But that's something that, if we ever do a more detailed map of different regions within the world of Gethra, we'll be able to get much more detail there. And these broad coastlines are enough to represent what's going on, I think. So, do I know other people who do these drawings? That's a good question too. So I follow a couple people. I'm actually subscribed to a guy on Patreon who does some stuff. I better not. I'm not sure that I'm allowed to show his work without his permission. But he's been working on something called the Atlas Eladin. Pardon if I'm getting the pronunciation wrong. But it is a atlas and encyclopedia of a large fictional world. And he doesn't do live streams or anything like that that I'm aware of. But he's uploading all of this world building there, and people can subscribe and support him and his work there. As he is a far better digital artist than me. So it's quite kind of inspiring to see his maps. I actually saw one of his maps a long time ago. Sorry, I think his username is Vora Pariah, but I remember seeing one of his maps a long time ago on another site and thinking, wow, I'll never be able to do a map as detailed and amazing as this one. And then years later, I found him. I found that he was doing this whole world in that setting. That was just one land that I had seen, and so very interesting. But there's a few different sites. There's a site called the Cartographers Guild, which is a forum where map enthusiasts, will share maps with each other. There's lots of stuff on Reddit that you can find, and there's a lot of really good maps out there. But people have all different approaches for it. I really like to be inspired by the real world, and so I'm, I as you can see, I've got a map where I've drawn my tectonic plates. I'm not a scientist, but I've done my best to look into how tectonic plates work, and I've got, Google Earth open to refer to. So you get a lot of, a lot of that kind of style from me. And other, world builders and artists, they're not as concerned with the realism because in their world, people can create an island with a snap of the fingers, or in their world, the processes that formed the land were not tectonic plates; they were the gods or some sort of magic or whatever else. So it's, everyone has their own different style, and you get maps that are, breathtaking in their, in how fantastical they are, but you also have other worlds that look like, man, is this, when you glance at it, you're like, is this a version, a map projection of Earth? And you realize, oh no, this is a different world. So it's very interesting. Do we freeze the program? No, we just got some lines that don't want to go away. I did have that happen once before. We'll have to take a look. Do some troubleshooting here. If I start getting some traction with the stream here, I may be able to do some collaboration type work with some of these world builders and artists. So we'll have to look into that. Yeah, it doesn't like drawing in this area here, so let's take a look at what's going on in 2 dimensions over here. Okay, we didn't quite make it across there yet. Oops. It works quite differently in 2 dimensions. Let's go back and take a look at what that did in 3D. Okay, that helped. Can we draw here now? Still not quite working the same, but we might just have to work around that. It's a bit better. I wonder if the distortion at the southern poles gets just too much for it. If I draw down here, there we go. Is this the closest point to the pole? Looks like it was over there, but we drew there yesterday and didn't have any problems. So, something weird's going on here, but whatever. Gotta remember to hydrate. I'll have to see if maybe once I'm done this I can share it on the Cartographers Guild or one of those other sites. This area looks like it's going to be very flat coast anyway, so I'll do some larger segments here. Especially since it's so troubled with drawing down here at these extreme coordinates. There we go. Now, I think we're moving closer to this kind of area here. Let me change my cursor. So we're going to have a little bit more mountainous activity here. This is kind of forming from a major tectonic kind of zone in the middle here. In fact, we should maybe add a couple little islands there because this would have something like Hawaii going on. You'd have some kind of volcanoes bubbling up in the middle and creating islands around them. Um, Nothing too substantial because I haven't kind of referenced that in Gethra before, but likely that is something. Maybe they're not even discovered yet, or maybe the people who live there haven't haven't moved beyond. And then there'd be some leftover mountains from when that land was closer to that seam, and it's been kind of moving off as you know more and more of the magma kind of comes up from the crust. Oops, I forgot we use a smaller one on here. Now hopefully it'll let me draw a little bit more closely. Oh, and we're back to normal, right in there. Try this one a couple times. Now this area, while it is mountainous, would be a little bit more eroded than many of the other mountains, both because it was formed by a different type of tectonic seam, where the tectonic plates meet. It was formed by a different one instead of a kind of colliding motion or a scraping motion, or instead of a crashing motion. Instead, it's a pulling apart motion. So the mountains are going to be different because of that, and also because it's been a long time since those mountains were near the tectonic seam. So would have been eroded by wind and ice and you know other weather for this whole time. Still wants to do this. We'll have to tidy that section up once we get to Photoshop. Just didn't want to convert very well. Now, how far does this mountainous area go? Let me zoom in a little bit more. So it doesn't go very far, and then we move into an area that's been sheltered by the storms a bit more. Again, I think Mediterranean Sea is not a bad comparison. However, it is a much different latitude, so it would be not as affected by all the ice and glaciers. So if we just look at the coastlines there, it looks like you got a bit of everything because, of course, you got mountainous areas, you've got desert, so we'll have to kind of just do a moderately rugged coast because of the ice, and otherwise keep it kind of straightforward. If you're wondering about the numbers, I haven't really touched on that in our thing, but I needed to convert in order to get the right scale for this known world of Gethra, which is where the story is taking place so far, and I've shown you guys that other map here. So in order to make sure that I got the right scale of this world onto our globe, I needed to figure out how, where the lines of latitude and longitude were. And in order to do that, I either needed to draw grid lines on this sphere, which is much easier said than done, or instead just figure out how many vertices and angles there are in this 3D object. So I counted them out and then just converted that, then I could figure out, well, if there's 90 degrees, how does that work out between 7 or 8 sections, panels? And then that way I could figure out the size of the known world, and I can also, estimate how large different land masses should be, etc. So that's why you have numbers all over the place. And I didn't really show this either when we were looking at the world of, or the known world of Gethra. But I also put in here time zones just because I thought that would be interesting. So we've read a little bit about Venuth, who's over here in Numenacris, and when it is noon or around noon for Venuth, it may actually be mid-afternoon for Renato, who is over in Kedarport. So just like in our world where we have different time zones and different parts of the world would have a whole different time, I thought it'd be kind of cool to imagine that. If we imagine Renato, meeting with the criminals there in Kedarport, he had like maybe it was mid afternoon. Well, it would have been earlier in the day for these other characters over in Numenacris or further. Just kind of a fun little detail that I like to figure out. That's why I enjoy figuring out the realistic world building approach so much, because I think it adds some realism to the stories and gives you that there's interesting little tidbits like that can be discovered about the relationship between characters and places and storylines. Well, we've got quite a bit done here. I think I'll move on now. So are the time zones calibrated to go around the globe to meet again, like Earth's 24 hours? Yeah. I haven't done that on the globe map yet. But these lines, the grid lines here on the known worlds, those are accurate lines of latitude and longitude. And so I was able to just use Earth's and say, it's all in degrees, so it doesn't matter how large or small the planet is. The same number of degrees will apply either way, and so I could figure out, what that was. I decided to make the capital city of Rema noon because Rema is probably one of the more historically advanced cities, at least in the known world. When we spoke yesterday about the impact of the Orish, this major meteor that set back so many of these cultures and civilizations, hundreds or thousands of years technologically. They lost all of the infrastructure that kept them organized as a culture. It would have been almost apocalyptic. And yet, meanwhile, over here in Rema, they had a very strange year because it would have it would have blocked out the sky. But at the same time, they didn't lose population and infrastructure and buildings and wealth and thousands of lives. So in Rema, time kept going, and so they've become one of the hubs of civilization, if you would. And so I decided to make that noon. But you would continue around the world, so the opposite side, whatever's opposite from Rema. If we look on the sphere, we can actually probably figure that out. So Rema is about here, or maybe over here. And so the opposite side of the world would be, well, what is this? Let me find that again. So this was 4, and I think I counted up to 32. I'm not going to be able to do that math very well, but let's go this way. Got the line there. So it'd be somewhere in there. Let me get this all turned around again. So it was around 20. So somewhere over here, when it is noon in Rema, in Numenacris, somewhere over here it is midnight, in the middle of the night, and the sun would be off over in the distance, somewhere beyond over there. And so, yeah, it will be interesting once we get into more cultural world building for these different areas, for the rest of the world of Gethra. We'll be able to find out more interesting things about, how do they perceive, or what have they discovered about day and night and months and years, and how does that inform their culture, and certain things like that. And for example, the Orish, this was a major event, would have affected everything worldwide. So we would have places, Rema could learn, or Numenacris could learn what happened from talking to, people who lived closer or survived, or people who have been there and investigated. Meanwhile, over here, they would have said, why did we have such a horrible winter this year? And would have no idea why. And so that would have become a major part of their culture, this event that happened in their past. It would have religious symbolism probably, or would have driven a scientific, curiosity perhaps. And so those are things that we'll be able to delve deeper into. And maybe there are things that have happened elsewhere in Gethra that have influenced the known world, which we haven't discovered yet. So there's lots of potential for the future stories we'll be able to uncover here. All right, I think that's enough for the globe segment now. So I'll just clean up my workstation here a little bit. All right, and then I think we're going to move on to part of the podcast for the Lives of Gethra stories.